The sound of gunfire shattered the afternoon stillness in Redemption Creek, but Nathan Hayes barely flinched as he slid his weathered Stetson lower over his eyes. He'd heard too many shots in his 32 years to be startled anymore, though the desperation in the feminine scream that followed made his blood run cold. It was 1878, and the West was growing more civilized by the day, but not quickly enough to save whoever was in trouble just beyond the ridge. Nathan abandoned his campsite without a second thought, swinging onto his dappled gray stallion and spurring toward the commotion. What he found made his jaw tighten. 3 men surrounding a stagecoach, one holding the driver at gunpoint while the others terrorized a lone female passenger. Her traveling trunk lay spilled open on the dusty ground, its contents scattered by rough hands. "I said I have nothing of value," the woman shouted, her voice strong despite her predicament. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins, cascading down her back as she backed away from her tormentors. "Search her again," ordered the tallest outlaw, his face hidden behind a faded bandana. "Nobody travels this route without something worth taking." Nathan didn't hesitate. He'd never been one for heroics, preferring the solitary life since returning from the war, but some lines couldn't be crossed, not while he drew breath. "Gentlemen," he called out, his voice carrying across the distance with casual menace. "I believe the lady has made herself clear." 3 heads whipped around, hands moving to weapons. Nathan kept his posture relaxed, though his right hand hovered near his holster. "This ain't your concern, stranger," spat the leader. "Ride on if you know what's good for you." Nathan smiled without humor. "That's always been my problem. Never did know what was good for me." What happened next was a blur of motion. The first outlaw drew, but Nathan was faster, his revolver clearing leather with practiced precision. The shot caught the man in the shoulder, spinning him to the ground. The second outlaw fired wildly, the bullet whistling past Nathan's ear as he returned fire, catching the man in the leg. The leader, seeing his companions fall, took aim at Nathan with cold deliberation. Nathan felt the burning impact before he heard the shot, a hot poker of pain driving into his side. Despite the shock, his own shot flew true, catching the outlaw in the chest. The silence that followed seemed deafening. Nathan slumped in his saddle, pressing his hand against the spreading warmth at his waist. "Are you all right?" he called to the woman, vision beginning to swim. She rushed toward him, her face pale with concern. "You're hurt. Oh God, you're bleeding badly." Nathan tried to reassure her, but the words wouldn't form. The last thing he remembered was falling, the ground rising up to meet him as darkness claimed his consciousness. Dreams and memories blended in Nathan's fevered mind. He was back on the battlefield at Shiloh, then riding fence on his father's ranch, then standing at his parents' graves after the smallpox took them. Throughout it all, a gentle voice called him back, a cool hand on his forehead anchoring him to life. When Nathan finally clawed his way back to consciousness, the first thing he noticed was the unfamiliar ceiling above him. The second was the weight of someone holding his hand. He turned his head slowly, pain throbbing with the movement, to find a woman sitting beside his bed. She was beautiful in an unconventional way, strong features, intelligent hazel eyes, and that dark hair now neatly pinned up. But what caught his attention was the glint of gold on her finger as she adjusted her grip on his hand. A ring. A wedding band. "You're awake," she said, relief washing over her face. "The doctor wasn't sure you'd make it." Nathan tried to speak, his throat parched. She quickly offered him water, supporting his head as he drank. "Who?" he managed to rasp. "I'm Josephine Winters," she said. "Though according to everyone in this town, I'm now Mrs. Hayes." She held up her hand, the gold band catching the light. "Your wife." Nathan stared at her in confusion, wondering if he was still dreaming. "You were dying," she explained softly. "The doctor said you needed surgery, but the local preacher refused to let me stay with you unless we were married. Said it wasn't proper for an unmarried woman to be alone with a man, even a dying one." Her cheeks flushed. So, I told them I was your wife. The doctor was skeptical, so someone found a ring and… here we are. Nathan's mind struggled to make sense of her words. You married me? While I was unconscious. Not legally, Josephine clarified quickly. It was just a necessary fiction. To save your life. You took 3 bullets defending me, Mr. Hayes. I couldn't very well abandon you. Nathan closed his eyes, processing this strange turn of events. Nathan, he corrected. If we're supposedly married, you should at least use my given name. A small smile touched her lips. Nathan, then. How long have I been here? Almost 2 weeks. You developed a fever after the surgery. We're in a town called Silverwa. Nathan tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, pain lancing through his side. Don't, Josephine said firmly, pressing him back against the pillows. The doctor said you need at least another week of bed rest. You're lucky to be alive. What about the men who attacked you? Her expression darkened. 2 survived. They're in the jail awaiting the circuit judge. She hesitated. The sheriff will want to speak with you when you're stronger. Nathan nodded, suddenly exhausted by even this brief conversation. As his eyes grew heavy, a question nagged at him. Why? He murmured. Why would you stay? Pretend to be married to a stranger? Josephine's answer followed him into sleep. Because good men are rare in this world, Nathan Hayes. And I owe you my life. In the days that followed, Nathan learned more about his wife through their conversations as he slowly regained his strength. Josephine Winters was 26, educated in Boston, and traveling west to take a position as a schoolteacher in Sierra Vista, some 60 miles further. I was supposed to arrive 2 weeks ago, she explained on the 3rd day of his consciousness as she changed his bandages with gentle efficiency. I've sent a telegram explaining the delay, but I don't know if they'll still want me. Why Sierra Vista? Nathan asked, trying to distract himself from her proximity and the strange intimacy of her tending to him. It's where the opportunity was, she said simply. After my father died last year, there wasn't much keeping me in Boston. I wanted something different. Teaching in a mining town is certainly different from Boston society. A wry smile crossed her face. I wasn't exactly part of Boston society, Mr. Hayes. Nathan, she corrected herself. My father was a professor, not a Brahmin. We lived comfortably enough, but I've always had to work. I taught at a girls' school there for 5 years. Nathan watched her methodical movements as she secured the fresh bandage. You're good at that. I volunteered as a nurse during the last year of the war, she said. I was only 17, but they needed every pair of hands they could get. That explained her composure in a crisis. Which side? He asked, realizing too late the question might be impolitic. Josephine met his eyes steadily. The Union, of course. Though I treated Confederate soldiers too, when they came through our hospital. She hesitated. And you? Confederate, he admitted. Not by choice. My family had a small ranch in Texas. When the call came, you answered or faced consequences. She nodded, no judgment in her expression. War makes pawns of us all. A knock at the door interrupted them. Dr. Morris entered, a portly man with spectacles and a perpetually worried expression. Good morning, Mrs. Hayes, he greeted Josephine before turning to Nathan. And how is our patient today? Ready to get out of this bed, Nathan replied. The doctor harumphed as he examined the wound. Not quite yet, I'm afraid. The infection is cleared, but you need to build your strength back. Another few days at least. He turned to Josephine. You've done an excellent job with his care, Mrs. Hayes. Most wives wouldn't have the stomach for it. Nathan caught the flicker of discomfort on Josephine's face at the continued deception, but she merely thanked the doctor. After he left, Nathan spoke quietly. This charade must be difficult for you. Josephine busied herself tidying the medical supplies. It's temporary. Once you're well enough to travel, I'll continue to Sierra Vista, and you'll go wherever you were headed before our paths crossed. I wasn't headed anywhere in particular, Nathan admitted. Just drifting. She looked at him curiously. No home? No family? Not anymore. He didn't elaborate, and she didn't press. Well, for now you should rest, she said, gathering her shawl. I promised Mrs. Gunderson I'd help at the general store this afternoon. She's been kind enough to give me some work to offset our room and board. After she left, Nathan lay staring at the ceiling, pondering the strange twist of fate that had put him in this situation. He hadn't stayed in one place for more than a week since selling his father's ranch 3 years ago. Hadn't allowed himself to form attachments. And yet here he was, playing husband to a woman he barely knew, finding himself looking forward to her return each time she left the room. It was dangerous thinking. When he was healed, they would part ways. That was the arrangement. Anything else would be folly. By the end of the week, Nathan was strong enough to sit in a chair by the window, watching the bustling main street of Silverwater below. It was a prosperous-looking town, with solid wooden buildings and well-dressed citizens going about their business. "Sheriff's coming to see you today," Josephine announced as she brought him lunch, a hearty stew from the hotel kitchen. "He needs your statement about the robbery." Nathan nodded, accepting the bowl.
About time.
Been wondering when he'd show up. He's been giving you time to recover, she said, sitting across from him. Sheriff Parker is a good man. Fair. You've gotten to know the town well in a short time, Nathan observed. A slight blush colored her cheeks. Small towns run on gossip. Being the wife of the mysterious wounded stranger who fought off stagecoach robbers makes me interesting. Everyone wants to chat. And what do you tell them about your husband? Nathan asked, curious despite himself. As little as possible, she replied with a small smile. I say we've been married just over a year, that we met in Dallas, and that you're in the cattle business. Nothing specific enough to contradict whatever you might say. Nathan nodded appreciatively. Smart. I've had practice crafting stories, Josephine said. Teaching children requires considerable imagination. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock. Sheriff Parker entered without waiting for a response, a tall man with a silver-streaked beard and watchful eyes. Mr. Hayes, he greeted, tipping his hat to Josephine. Madam. Hope I'm not interrupting your meal. Not at all, Sheriff, Nathan replied, setting aside his bowl. I understand you have questions. Just need your account of what happened with the Pharaoh gang, the sheriff said, pulling up a chair. Got 2 of them locked up, but their story changes with the weather.
Pharaoh gang?
Nathan repeated. That's right. Led by Elias Pharaoh, the one you shot dead. His brother Silas and cousin Dexter are the 2 you wounded. They've been terrorizing travelers between here and Mesa Ridge for months. Nathan recounted the events as he remembered them, keeping his statement factual and concise. The sheriff listened attentively, occasionally making notes. Matches what Mrs. Hayes told us, he said when Nathan finished. And the stage driver, too, before he continued on his route. He pocketed his notebook. You're a good shot, Mr. Hayes. Military training. Some, Nathan acknowledged cautiously. The sheriff studied him. You know, we could use a man with your skills in this town. Deputy positions open if you're interested, once you're back on your feet. The offer caught Nathan off guard. I appreciate that, Sheriff, but we won't be staying in Silverwater. He glanced at Josephine. My wife has a teaching position waiting in Sierra Vista. Something like disappointment flickered across Josephine's face, but she quickly composed herself. That's right. We'll be moving on as soon as Nathan is well enough to travel. Sheriff Parker nodded slowly.
Shame.
Well, the offer stands if you change your mind. He rose, adjusting his gun belt. The judge arrives next week for the Pharaoh trial. You'll need to testify, Mr. Hayes. After the sheriff left, silence hung between them. Finally, Josephine spoke. You didn't have to say that. About us leaving together. Nathan met her gaze. seemed the simplest explanation. Unless you wanted me to expose our arrangement. No, she admitted. That would create complications. Another silence fell, heavier this time. Do you still intend to take the teaching position? Nathan asked finally. Josephine looked out the window. I don't know. The school board's last telegram was less enthusiastic about my delayed arrival. They've found a temporary replacement. She sighed. I should still go, at least to see if the position remains open. Nathan nodded, ignoring the strange sense of disappointment her words evoked. And I'll testify at the trial, then move on. Yes, she agreed softly.
That was always the plan.
That night, Nathan woke to the sound of muffled sobs. He found Josephine sitting by the window in her nightgown and robe, moonlight illuminating the tears on her cheeks. Josephine, he called softly, not wanting to startle her. She quickly wiped her face. I'm sorry. Did I wake you? No, he lied, slowly making his way to the chair opposite hers, mindful of his healing wound. What's wrong? She shook her head. It's nothing. Just a moment of weakness. Nathan waited, sensing there was more. I received another telegram from Sierra Vista today, she finally admitted. The school board has permanently filled the position. They said my unreliability made me unsuitable. I'm sorry, Nathan said, genuinely meaning it. This is my fault. If you hadn't stayed to help me, don't, she interrupted. I made my choice. I don't regret it. She wiped away another tear. It's just, I'm not sure what to do now. My savings won't last forever, and I have no home to return to. Nathan considered her predicament. What about teaching here in Silverwater? They already have a teacher, she said. A young man from Denver. The hotel owner's wife told me. They sat in silence for a moment, the moonlight casting long shadows across the room. We could go to Denver, Nathan found himself saying. Or San Francisco. Big cities always need teachers. Josephine looked at him in surprise. We. Nathan hadn't meant to say it, hadn't even realized he was thinking it. Yet now that the words were out, he didn't want to take them back. If you wanted, he said carefully. Two people traveling together is safer than one alone. At least until you find a new position. Hope and skepticism warred on her face. Why would you do that? You saved my life, he replied simply. Seems only fair I help you find your feet again. It wasn't the whole truth. Something about Josephine Winters had gotten under his skin, her courage, her kindness, her quiet strength. But he wasn't ready to examine those feelings too closely, and she certainly wasn't ready to hear them. I'll think about it, she said finally. Thank you for the offer. In the morning, neither of them mentioned their moonlit conversation. But something had shifted between them, a new awareness that made their pretend marriage feel suddenly more complicated. The next few days passed in a blur of increasing activity as Nathan regained his strength. By the end of the week, he was able to walk the length of the hotel corridor without assistance, though the exertion left him winded. The doctor says you're making remarkable progress, Josephine reported after Dr. Morris's latest visit. Though he still advises against any strenuous activity for another 2 weeks. Nathan grimaced. 2 more weeks in this town? The trial starts in 3 days, she reminded him. We couldn't leave before then anyway.
We.
The word hung between them, neither acknowledging its implications. On the day of the trial, Nathan dressed in his cleanest shirt and the new vest Josephine had purchased for him at the general store, insisting he couldn't testify in his blood-stained clothes. You look respectable, she said approvingly, helping him with his string tie. Her fingers lingered at his collar, and for a moment, they stood close enough that he could smell the lavender water she used. So do you, he replied, taking in her neat blue dress and carefully arranged hair. Every inch the schoolteacher. A shadow crossed her face at the reminder of her lost position, but she quickly recovered. We should go. The courthouse will be crowded. She was right. It seemed the entire town had turned out to witness the trial of the infamous Pharaoh gang members. Nathan and Josephine found seats near the front, where he would have less distance to walk when called to testify. Judge Thaddeus Wainwright was a formidable presence, with piercing eyes and a booming voice that filled the makeshift courtroom in what was normally the town hall. The proceedings moved swiftly, with the stage driver testifying first about the attempted robbery. When Nathan's turn came, he recounted the events clearly and without embellishment. The defense attorney, a young, nervous man clearly outmatched by the prosecutor, tried to suggest Nathan had fired first, but the cross-examination only served to reinforce Nathan's version of events. "And you engaged these men solely to protect Mrs. Hayes?" the prosecutor asked, gesturing toward Josephine. Nathan hesitated only briefly.
Yes.
"She was in danger. I couldn't ride past that." "Even though you didn't know her at the time?" "That's correct." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor smiled slightly. "A true Western gentleman. No further questions, Your Honor." After Josephine's testimony, which matched Nathan's account exactly, the jury deliberated for less than an hour before returning a guilty verdict. Judge Wainwright sentenced Silas Pharaoh to 15 years in the territorial prison and his cousin Dexter to 10. "Justice has been served," Sheriff Parker declared as he shook Nathan's hand outside the courthouse. "Thanks to you and your wife." As they walked back to the hotel, Josephine took Nathan's arm, ostensibly to support him, though he needed it less each day. "You didn't have to lie about me being the reason you intervened," she said quietly. "Wasn't a lie," he replied. "You were the reason. I just didn't know your name yet." She looked up at him, studying his face as if seeing him anew. "You're a good man, Nathan Hayes." "Not particularly," he demurred. "Just can't abide bullies." That evening, as they shared a celebratory dinner in the hotel restaurant, Nathan found himself watching Josephine, the way she smiled at the waiter, how she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, the graceful movement of her hands as she spoke. He was in dangerous territory, and he knew it. "I've been thinking about your offer," she said suddenly, setting down her fork. "To travel together until I find a new position." Nathan's heart quickened unexpectedly. "And I'm grateful, truly. But I can't accept." Though he'd known this was the most likely answer, disappointment still washed over him. "May I ask why?" Josephine looked down at her plate. "Because continuing this arrangement would be unfair to both of us. You've been drifting for years, by your own admission. You don't need the burden of a traveling companion." "I wouldn't have offered if I considered it a burden," Nathan said quietly. "Perhaps not now," she acknowledged. "But eventually it would become one. And there would be talk, Nathan. A man and woman traveling together without being truly married? We'd face suspicion and judgment everywhere we went." She was right, of course. It was a practical impossibility, no matter what unnamed feelings might be developing between them. "What will you do?" he asked instead. "There's a position open in Juniper Falls, about 100 miles east of here. The sheriff helped me inquire by telegraph. It's not as good as Sierra Vista would have been, but it's a start." Nathan nodded slowly. "When will you leave?" "The eastbound stage comes through in 3 days." She hesitated. "And you?" "North, probably," he said, though he had no real plan. "There's ranch work to be had in Wyoming this time of year." They finished their meal in silence, each contemplating the coming separation, neither willing to acknowledge the reluctance they felt. That night, Nathan lay awake long after Josephine's breathing had evened into sleep in the adjoining room. Their arrangement had always been temporary and necessary fiction, as she'd called it. So, why did the thought of parting ways leave him feeling hollow? The answer was simple, though he'd been avoiding it. In the 3 weeks since he'd awakened to find Josephine by his bedside, he developed feelings for her that went well beyond gratitude or friendship. But she deserved better than a drifter with no home and no prospects. A man still haunted by the war and the family he'd failed to save from disease. No, it was better this way. They would part as friends, each returning to their separate paths. It was the sensible thing to do. But as dawn broke, Nathan realized he'd never been particularly sensible when it mattered most. The next 2 days passed with a strange tension between them, each interaction weighted with unsaid words. Nathan continued to regain his strength, now able to walk the length of the town's main street without discomfort. Dr. Morris pronounced him remarkably recovered, though warned against horseback riding for at least another week. "You've been a model patient, Mrs. Hayes," the doctor told Josephine during his final visit. "Your husband is lucky to have such a devoted wife." After he left, Josephine began packing her few belongings, avoiding Nathan's gaze. "I should be ready for tomorrow's stage," she said, folding a shawl with precise movements. Nathan watched her from the doorway. "Have you written ahead to Juniper Falls?"
Yes.
"They're expecting me in 3 days." She continued packing, her movements becoming more agitated. "They've arranged lodging with a widow near the school." "Sounds suitable," Nathan said, though the words felt inadequate. Josephine stopped suddenly, her hands gripping the edge of her open trunk. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice tight. "We're acting like strangers again. What would you prefer?" Nathan asked softly. She turned to face him, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I don't know. I just know that saying goodbye shouldn't be this difficult after only 3 weeks of acquaintance." "Josephine, please don't," she interrupted. "Don't say something kind that will make this harder. We both know this is for the best. You have your life, and I have mine. Our paths crossed by chance, and now they'll diverge again. That's all." Nathan stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "Is that really all it was? Chance?" Her breath caught. "What else could it be?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But I've spent 3 years drifting with no destination in mind, and suddenly I find myself reluctant to leave a town I never intended to visit in the first place." Hope flickered briefly in her eyes before she shook her head. "Nathan, please. We barely know each other." "I know you're brave," he said, taking another step toward her. "I know you're kind and intelligent and stubborn. I know you believe in education and second chances. I know you take your coffee with sugar but no milk, and you hum when you're concentrating." He took a breath. "And I know I've never met anyone like you, Josephine Winters." A tear slipped down her cheek. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't want you to leave tomorrow. Or, if you must leave, I want to go with you. Not as a temporary arrangement, but as—" He faltered, the words suddenly difficult. "As what?" she whispered. Nathan took her hand, his thumb brushing over the gold band she still wore as part of their deception. "As your husband. For real this time." Josephine stared at him in shock. "You can't be serious." "Completely serious," he assured her. "I know it's sudden and probably foolish, but I've spent too many years letting opportunities pass by. I don't want to make that mistake with you." She pulled her hand away, turning back to her trunk. "You're not thinking clearly. This is gratitude or misplaced chivalry." "It's neither," Nathan insisted. "Josephine, look at me." Reluctantly, she faced him again. "I'm not offering marriage out of obligation," he said firmly. "I'm offering because these weeks with you have shown me what I've been missing all these years. Someone to talk with. Someone who challenges me. Someone who makes me want to stop running and start building something." "And what would we build?" she asked, her voice unsteady. "You have no home, no roots. And I'm about to start over in a town where I know no one. Then we'll build together," Nathan said simply. "In Juniper Falls or somewhere else. I have savings from the sale of my father's ranch. Enough to start over." Josephine searched his face, looking for any sign of uncertainty. "You would give up your freedom for a woman you've known less than a month?" Nathan smiled. "I'm not giving up anything worth keeping. And I'm gaining everything worth having." She shook her head slowly, but there was a new softness in her expression. "You are either the most impulsive man I've ever met, or the bravest." "Probably a bit of both," he admitted. "Is that a yes?" "It's a you're completely mad," Josephine replied, but a smile tugged at her lips. "And I would need time. To be sure." "Time I can give," Nathan said, relief washing through him that she hadn't outright refused. "We could travel to Juniper Falls as planned. You can take the teaching position. I'll find work nearby. We can court properly, get to know each other without the pressure of a sick room or a deception." Hope dawned in her eyes. "You would do that?" "Come with me, but not as my husband." "I would do that," he confirmed, "though I'd hope to earn the right to that title eventually." For the first time since he'd known her, Josephine laughed freely, the sound filling the room with unexpected joy. "Nathan Hayes, you are unlike any man I've ever met." "Is that good or bad?" he asked, smiling despite his uncertainty. "I'm not entirely sure yet," she replied honestly, "but I think I'd like to find out." The next morning found them both on the eastbound stage, Josephine sitting primly in her traveling clothes, Nathan beside her, his side still tender, but healing well. They had explained their change in plans to Sheriff Parker, who seemed unsurprised. "Figured you might be heading to Juniper Falls together," he said with a knowing smile. "Small towns talk, Mrs. Hayes. The way you two look at each other isn't exactly subtle." Now, as the stage rattled down the dusty road away from Silverwater, Josephine gazed out the window, a mix of uncertainty and anticipation on her face. "Having second thoughts?" Nathan asked quietly. She turned to him, her expression softening. "Not second thoughts. Just contemplating how drastically my life has changed in a month. I left Boston expecting to teach in Sierra Vista, and now I'm heading to Juniper Falls with a man I met at gunpoint." Nathan chuckled. "When you put it that way, it does sound rather dramatic." "Life rarely follows the paths we expect," she mused. "My father used to say that the measure of a person is not how well they plan, but how well they adapt when plans inevitably change." "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was," she said, a hint of sadness coloring her voice. "He would have liked you, I think. He valued honesty and courage above all else." The stage hit a particularly deep rut, jolting the passengers. Nathan winced as the movement pulled at his healing wound. "Are you all right?" Josephine asked immediately, her hand finding his arm. "Fine," he assured her. "Just a reminder to take things slowly for a while longer." Their fellow passengers, an elderly couple and a traveling salesman, were dozing despite the rough ride. Taking advantage of their privacy, Josephine spoke softly. "Nathan, there's something I need to ask you." "Anything?" She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "This arrangement we've made. I need to know that you truly want this. That it's not just about repaying a debt or fulfilling some sense of obligation." Nathan considered her questions seriously. "When I woke up and found you beside my bed, wearing that ring and claiming to be my wife, my first thought wasn't confusion or anger. It was regret that I couldn't remember marrying you." He took her hand gently. "Does that answer your question?" A blush colored her cheeks. "It's a start." The journey to Juniper Falls took 2 days, with an overnight stop in a small way station where they shared a meal with their fellow travelers before retiring to separate rooms, Nathan insisting on propriety now that they were courting in earnest. Juniper Falls proved to be smaller than Silverwater but more established, with a proper church, school building, and even a small library. The town sat nestled against rolling hills covered in the juniper trees that gave it its name, a creek winding alongside the main street. The widow Mrs. Thornton, who had agreed to board Josephine, greeted them warmly at her neat 2-story house near the school. "Welcome, Miss Winters," she said, a plump, cheerful woman with silver-streaked red hair. "And who might this gentleman be?" "This is Mr. Hayes," Josephine explained. "A friend who escorted me safely from Silverwater." Mrs. Thornton's eyes twinkled knowingly. "A friend, is it?" Well, Mr. Hayes, there's a decent boarding house 2 streets over if you're planning to stay in town. I am, Nathan confirmed. At least for a while. After getting Josephine settled, Nathan found the boarding house and secured a room, then set about exploring the town and inquiring about work. By supper time, he had arranged to meet with a rancher named Holloway the following day about a position helping with his horses. That evening, he called on Josephine at Mrs. Thornton's, bringing a small bouquet of wild flowers he'd gathered on the edge of town. "These are lovely," she said, arranging them in a jar as they sat on the front porch under Mrs. Thornton's watchful eye through the window. "How was your day?" "Productive," Nathan replied. "Yours?" "I met with the school board," she said, her expression brightening. "Classes start in 2 weeks. There are 27 students enrolled, ages 6 to 16. "You're excited," he observed, enjoying the animation in her face. "I am," she admitted. "It's a small school, but that means I can give each student more attention. And the board chairman mentioned they're considering expanding next year if enrollment continues to increase." They talked until dusk, Mrs. Thornton eventually bringing them lemonade before retreating to give them some privacy, though she left the front door conspicuously ajar. "I should go," Nathan said finally, reluctant to leave but mindful of propriety. "May I call on you tomorrow evening?" "I'd like that," Josephine replied softly. As Nathan walked back to his boarding house under a sky brilliant with stars, he marveled at the strange turns his life had taken. A month ago, he'd been a drifter with no destination and no purpose. Now, he found himself looking forward to tomorrow for the first time in years. The following weeks established a pattern that felt both new and comfortably familiar. Nathan secured the position with Rancher Holloway, working with horses, breaking the wild ones, training others for specific tasks. The work was physically demanding but satisfying, allowing him to use skills he developed since childhood. Josephine threw herself into preparing for the school term, organizing books, planning lessons, and meeting her future students and their parents. In the evenings, Nathan would call on her, and they would walk through town or sit on Mrs. Thornton's porch, getting to know each other beyond the crisis that had brought them together. "Tell me about your family," Josephine asked one evening as they strolled along the creek that ran behind the school. Nathan was silent for a moment, memories both painful and precious surfacing. "My father was a hard man but fair. Ran a small cattle ranch in the hill country of Texas. My mother was gentler, loved books, taught me to read before I ever set foot in a schoolhouse." "And siblings?" "A younger brother, James. He died at Gettysburg." Nathan's voice grew quieter. "After the war, I returned home to find my parents struggling to keep the ranch going. We were starting to rebuild when smallpox swept through the area. They both fell ill. I didn't." Josephine's hand found his, squeezing gently. "I'm sorry." "It was 3 years ago," Nathan said. "After I buried them, I sold the ranch. Couldn't bear to stay." "So you've been wandering since then," she murmured. He nodded. "Until now." The implication hung between them, neither quite ready to examine it too closely. "What about your family?" Nathan asked, turning the conversation to her. Josephine smiled sadly. "Just my father after my mother died when I was 12. He was a professor of literature at a small college. We lived for books and ideas." Her expression grew distant. "When he died, I kept teaching, but the house felt so empty. When I saw the advertisement for the position in Sierra Vista, it seemed like a sign, a chance to start fresh somewhere completely different." "Do you regret coming west?" Nathan asked. "Not for a moment," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. As September turned to October, Josephine began teaching, her days filled with lessons and her evenings often occupied with grading and preparation. Nathan adjusted his calling times accordingly, sometimes bringing her dinner when she worked late at the schoolhouse. The townsfolk quickly grew accustomed to seeing them together, and speculation about their relationship ran rampant. Mrs. Thornton fielded questions with diplomatic vagueness, protecting Josephine's reputation while allowing the courtship to progress naturally. One crisp Saturday in late October, Nathan took Josephine on a picnic in the hills overlooking the town. The juniper trees were interspersed with cottonwoods turning golden in the autumn light, creating a setting of natural splendor. "It's beautiful here," Josephine said as they spread a blanket in a small clearing. "I never imagined the West could be so varied and lovely." "It grows on you," Nathan agreed, unpacking the basket Mrs. Thornton had prepared for them. "I've seen deserts bloom after rain and mountains that make you feel like you can touch the sky." They ate sandwiches and apple pie, talking easily about Josephine's students and Nathan's work with the horses. As they finished, Nathan grew uncharacteristically quiet. "Is something wrong?" Josephine asked, noticing his change in demeanor. "No," he said quickly. "Just thinking." "About?" Nathan looked at her, taking in the way the sunlight caught in her dark hair, how her eyes reflected the blue of the autumn sky. In that moment, he knew with absolute certainty what he wanted. "About us," he said simply. "About the future." Josephine's breath caught. "Nathan." He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her fingers that no longer wore the ring from their Silverwater deception. "Josephine, these past 2 months have been the happiest I can remember. Getting to know you, building a life here. It's shown me what I've been missing all these years." "I've been happy too," she admitted softly. "I know we agreed to take things slowly," Nathan continued, "and if you need more time, I understand. But I also need you to know that my feelings haven't changed since Silverwater. If anything, they've only grown stronger." Josephine's eyes shimmered with emotion. "As have mine." Encouraged, Nathan reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I've been carrying this for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment." Josephine stared at the box, her lips parting in surprise. "This isn't the ring from Silverwater," Nathan clarified as he opened it, revealing a delicate gold band set with a small pearl. "That one wasn't really ours. This one could be if you want it to be." "Nathan," Josephine whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Josephine Winters, will you marry me? For real this time?" Tears spilled onto her cheeks as she nodded.
Yes.
"Yes, I will." Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger, where it fit perfectly. Then he cupped her face gently and kissed her for the first time, a tender, reverent kiss that held all the promise of their future together. When they returned to town, hand in hand with Josephine's new ring catching the afternoon light, Mrs. Thornton was the first to notice. Her delighted congratulations quickly spread through Juniper Falls, and by evening, it seemed the entire town knew of their engagement. "We should set a date," Josephine said that evening as they sat on Mrs. Thornton's porch, accepting well wishes from neighbors who happened to be passing by. "Whenever you want," Nathan replied. "Though I admit, I'd prefer sooner rather than later." Josephine laughed. "Impatient, Mr. Hayes? To start our life together?" "Absolutely." They decided on a December wedding, giving them time to prepare, while still marrying before the harshest winter weather set in. The weeks that followed were a flurry of activity. Nathan, with his savings and steady income from the ranch, purchased a small house on the edge of town, 2 bedrooms, a comfortable sitting room, and a kitchen with a view of the hills. "For when we have a family," he explained as he showed Josephine the second bedroom, causing her to blush deeply. The school children adored their teacher's romance, the older girls sighing dramatically whenever Nathan came to walk Josephine home. The younger boys, meanwhile, were impressed by the story of how they met, embellished in the retelling to make Nathan sound like a character from a dime novel. As their wedding day approached, Josephine found herself standing in the town's small dress shop, being fitted for a gown of cream-colored silk. "You make a beautiful bride, Miss Winters," said Mrs. Calloway, the dressmaker, as she pinned the hem. "Thank you," Josephine replied, hardly recognizing the woman in the mirror, cheeks flushed with happiness. eyes bright with anticipation. "Never seen a man so smitten as your Mr. Hayes," Mrs. Calloway continued, adjusting the bodice. "The way he looks at you reminds me of my Henry when we were young." "How long have you been married?" Josephine asked. 32 years next spring," the woman replied proudly. "Had our share of hard times, but never once regretted saying yes." "Any advice?" Josephine asked, suddenly aware of how quickly her life was changing. Mrs. Calloway considered the question as she worked. "Remember that love's a choice you make every day, not just a feeling that comes and goes. Stand by each other, and never go to bed angry." Simple wisdom, but it resonated with Josephine. As she left the shop, she found Nathan waiting outside, leaning against a hitching post. "You're not supposed to see the dress before the wedding," she scolded lightly. "Wasn't planning to," he assured her, offering his arm. "Just thought I'd escort my future wife home." As they walked, snow began to fall, the first of the season, delicate flakes drifting lazily from a pearl-gray sky. "It's a good omen," Nathan said, catching a snowflake on his palm. "My mother always said snow on an important day meant God was paying special attention." Josephine smiled, leaning into his warmth. "Then our wedding day should be blessed indeed. The almanac predicts snow all next week." The morning of their wedding dawned clear and cold, the world transformed overnight into a glistening white landscape. In Mrs. Thornton's front bedroom, Josephine prepared with the help of several women from town, including young Sally Jenkins, her brightest student, who had been selected as flower girl. "You look like an angel, Miss Winters," Sally breathed as Josephine stood in her completed wedding attire, the cream silk gown, a lace veil borrowed from Mrs. Thornton, and a bouquet of hothouse flowers brought in specially from the next town over. "Soon she'll be Mrs. Hayes, Mrs. Thornton corrected gently, securing the last hairpin in Josephine's upswept hair. "There. Perfect." A knock at the door revealed Rancher Holloway, who had offered to escort Josephine down the aisle in the absence of her father. "It's time, Miss Winters. Everyone's gathered at the church." Josephine took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. "I'm ready." The small church was filled to capacity. It seemed the entire town had turned out for the occasion. As Josephine entered on Mr. Holloway's arm, her eyes found Nathan immediately, standing tall and handsome at the altar in a new black suit, his usually unruly hair neatly combed. The expression on his face as he saw her, wonder, joy, love, was one Josephine knew she would remember for the rest of her life. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion. They had chosen traditional vows, the familiar words taking on new depth and meaning as they pledged themselves to one another before God and their community. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Simmons declared. "Mr. Hayes, you may kiss your bride." As Nathan's lips met hers, sealing their vows with a tender kiss, Josephine felt a sense of rightness, of coming home. This man, who had taken bullets to save her when she was a stranger, was now her husband. Not as a deception or temporary arrangement, but in truth and for life. The celebration afterward was held in the town hall, decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons for the season. There was music and dancing, with Nathan proving surprisingly adept at both the Virginia reel and the waltz. "Where did a cowboy learn to dance like this?" Josephine asked as he guided her expertly around the floor. "My mother insisted," he replied with a smile. "Said no son of hers would grow up unable to properly escort a lady at a social gathering." As evening fell, they said their goodbyes and rode in a decorated sleigh to their new home, where Nathan insisted on carrying Josephine across the threshold despite her protests about his still healing side. "I'm completely recovered," he assured her, setting her down gently in their sitting room, where a fire had been lit in anticipation of their arrival. "Dr. Morris said so himself last week." Josephine looked around their home, with a sense of wonder. "It's really ours, isn't it?" "Every inch," Nathan confirmed, removing his coat and helping her with hers. though I think we might need more bookshelves to accommodate your collection. She laughed, the sound bright in the cozy room. A wise observation, Mr. Hayes. I have my moments, Mrs. Hayes. The name sent a thrill through her. Mrs. Hayes. Josephine Hayes. It still seemed surreal that fate had brought them together in such unlikely circumstances. Later that night, as they lay entwined in their marriage bed, Nathan traced the curve of Josephine's cheek with gentle fingers. Happy? He asked softly. Completely, she whispered back. Are you? More than I ever thought possible. He drew her closer. You know, when I rode toward that stagecoach, I was just doing what seemed right in the moment. I never imagined it would lead me to you to this. God works in mysterious ways, Josephine murmured, resting her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Indeed he does, Nathan agreed. And I'm grateful for every bullet that brought me to you. Let's not make a habit of it, she said dryly. I prefer my husband without new holes. Nathan laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest beneath her ear. Yes, madam. Spring came to Juniper Falls in a riot of wildflowers and new growth. Josephine's school term was drawing to a close, with plans already forming for the following year. Nathan had been promoted to head trainer at Holloway's Ranch, his natural affinity with horses and calm leadership earning him the respect of the other workers. Their home had indeed acquired more bookshelves, along with other touches that made it uniquely theirs. A piano Josephine had yearned for and Nathan had surprised her with on her birthday, a handcrafted rocking chair on the front porch, where they often sat in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the hills in gold and crimson. On a warm May evening, as they walked along their favorite path beside the creek, Josephine stopped suddenly, her hand tightening on Nathan's arm. What is it? He asked, immediately concerned. Are you feeling unwell again? She had been under the weather lately, occasionally nauseated in the mornings, though she'd insisted it was nothing serious. Nathan, she said, her voice filled with emotion, I've been to see Dr. Wilson today. Alarm flickered across his face. What did he say? Is something wrong? A radiant smile spread across Josephine's face. Nothing's wrong. In fact, everything is wonderfully right. She took his hand and placed it gently against her still, flat abdomen. We're going to have a baby. Nathan stared at her for a long moment, processing her words. Then he let out a whoop of joy that startled a nearby flock of birds into flight, lifting Josephine off her feet and spinning her in a careful circle. A baby, he repeated in awe when he set her down. Our baby. Due in November, she confirmed, laughing at his exuberance. Dr. Wilson says I'm in excellent health, and everything appears normal. Nathan knelt suddenly, pressing a reverent kiss to her stomach through her dress. Hello, little one, he whispered. Your mama and papa can't wait to meet you. Josephine's eyes filled with tears at the tenderness of the gesture. I love you, Nathan Hayes. He stood, gathering her close. And I love you, Josephine Hayes. More every day. As they walked home hand in hand, making plans and sharing dreams for their growing family, Josephine reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them together: a stagecoach robbery, 3 bullets, and a pretend marriage that had become more real and precious than anything she could have imagined. What are you thinking about? Nathan asked, noticing her contemplative expression. About rings, she replied, looking down at the pearl ring on her finger that had replaced the borrowed wedding band from Silverwater. About how sometimes the most unexpected circles bring us exactly where we're meant to be. Nathan smiled, understanding her perfectly, as he always seemed to. I'm exactly where I'm meant to be, he said simply. With you. And as the setting sun cast long shadows across their path home, Josephine knew with absolute certainty that she was, too. Their son, James Thomas Hayes, was born on a snowy November night in 1879, entering the world with a lusty cry that made the midwife laugh and declare him strong as his father. With Nathan's dark hair and Josephine's hazel eyes, he became the center of their world, bringing new joy and deepening the bond between them. As the years passed, their family grew. A daughter, Elizabeth, joined them in 1881, followed by another son, William, in 1884. Josephine continued teaching until William's birth, then focused on her family while occasionally tutoring advanced students in their home. Nathan eventually purchased a partnership in Holloway's ranch, expanding it to include a successful horse breeding operation known throughout the territory for its quality stock. Their home grew too, with additions to accommodate their children and Josephine's ever-expanding library. They faced challenges, as all families do: harsh winters, economic uncertainties, childhood illnesses that brought sleepless nights of worry. But they faced them together, the partnership that had begun in deception growing stronger with each passing year. On their 10th anniversary, Nathan presented Josephine with a new ring to accompany her wedding band, a circle of small diamonds that caught the light like stars. 10 years, he said as he slipped it onto her finger. The best 10 years of my life. Mine too, she replied, her eyes shining with the same love that had guided them from strangers to spouses to parents. Though I expect the next 10 to be even better. Nathan smiled, drawing her close. I'm counting on it, Mrs. Hayes. I'm counting on it. And as they stood together on the porch of the home they'd built, watching their children play in the yard below, both knew that the unlikely journey that had brought them together, a cowboy defending a stranger, waking to find her beside him with a ring, had been just the beginning of their greatest adventure.